Sometimes what destroys a life begins with a glance no one notices, except the one about to be betrayed. I thought I had everything. A solid marriage, the kind people envy, the kind that makes you believe you actually did something right in life. A house I built with my own hands, a decent job, and Clara, my wife, who seemed tailor-made for me. But there was another piece in this puzzle. Jonas, my best friend since we were kids, losing baby teeth and fighting over action figures. He was there for everything, my falls, my wins, even the day I proposed to Clara. He held the ring in his sweaty palm and told me, "You got this, brother." He also, years later, destroyed me without ever looking me in the eyes. But that night, I didn't know anything yet. It was Clara's birthday. I had planned it all. Close friends, dim lights, food by her favorite chef, and of course Jonas was there, as always. The difference? He showed up late, and she changed the second he walked through the door. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle, like someone touching a hot pan and forcing a smile through the pain. They exchanged glances. Quick, barely there, but the kind that makes your stomach turn if you're the one being left out. I saw it. I felt it. But I did what any man too in love does, swallowed the discomfort and called it paranoia. Flashback. How it all began. I met Clara at a backyard BBQ Jonas dragged me to. He said, "Dude, you need to get out of that rut. There's life beyond your spreadsheets." That's when I saw her. Brown eyes, warm smile, leaning on a fence, laughing at something only she and Jonas seemed to get. Looking back, if I had been more aware, I would have seen it even then. The weird familiarity, the way they synced. But fate, when it wants to hurt you, starts with hope. Jonas introduced us. Clara looked at me like she saw something new, and that's how the triangle began. A triangle I thought was just a couple and a close friend. Signs no one notices. That night at the birthday dinner, I noticed something else. Jonas avoided touching Clara, almost too carefully. No hugs, no playful teasing, not even a proper birthday toast. It was like an invisible wall stood between them. And still, their eyes said too much. After the cake, I went to store the leftovers in the fridge. When I came back, I caught them in the kitchen. Clara laughing, Jonas whispering something in her ear. When they saw me, silence hit like a snapped wire. And in that silence, a seed of doubt was planted that would keep me up for weeks. Have you ever felt like something was off in your own home, but you couldn't prove it? That's how the end of my marriage began. Not with a fight, not with a confession, but with glances, with silences that screamed louder than any words, and with the cruelest kind of betrayal, the one that looks you in the eye and pretends it's love. A lie doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it's what someone refuses to say that hurts the most. The scene opens with a quiet morning. A man stirring coffee in silence. A woman humming out of tune. But something's missing. The ease, the warmth. It was the morning after Clara's birthday. I woke up before her. Usually I'd stay in bed watching her breathe, tracing futures in my mind. But that day, I couldn't. Something felt fractured. I went to the kitchen, made coffee the way she liked it. Oat milk, no sugar. She came in moments later, still in pajamas, smiling like everything was fine. And maybe that was the scariest part. The smile. Too perfect, too placed. "You okay?" she asked, noticing my silence. I nodded. Lie number one. But it wouldn't be the last. I picked up her phone by mistake. We had identical cases, part of some cute couple tradition we thought was romantic. I was going to check a recipe I had saved in my notes, but the screen was already unlocked, and it wasn't my notes that opened. It was a message, a single line. I couldn't sleep either. Sent at 2:14 a.m. from Jonas. I stared at it, felt my hands go cold, felt the floor turn into water. I didn't open it. I just locked the phone and placed it back, because part of me still wanted to believe, still needed to believe it wasn't what it looked like. That afternoon, I called Jonas. He picked up on the second ring. "Yo, what's up?" Too casual, too light. I said, "You good? You left kind of early last night." He hesitated, just for a second. Then came the excuse. "Yeah, stomach was weird. Must have been that shrimp. Tell Clara the food was amazing, though." He was trying too hard. Jonas never talked like that, and he never ever complimented Clara directly, not to me. Still, I laughed, brushed it off, told him to rest and we'd catch up later. Another lie, because I already knew something was off. I just didn't have proof yet. In the days that followed, Clara became kinder. She'd kiss my cheek when I came home, laugh at my jokes, ask about my day in a way she hadn't in months. But it felt like pity, like someone feeding sugar to a dying man so he doesn't notice the poison. We made love once that week, and it felt rehearsed, like a scene she needed to play right, not for passion, but for control. Afterward, she turned away, curled into a ball, and whispered, "I missed us." But even her back felt like a lie. Jonas once saved me from a brutal fight in college. I had mouthed off to the wrong guy. I was drunk, stupid, outnumbered. He stepped in, took a punch for me, got suspended for a week. When I apologized, he just grinned and said, "That's what brothers do, man." I built my loyalty to him on that moment, on pain, on blood. I thought people who bleed for you wouldn't sleep with your wife. But I was about to learn, loyalty doesn't stop betrayal. It just makes it easier to hide. The hardest part isn't the betrayal. It's the silence right before it, when everything looks normal, when no one says what they're doing, when love feels like a performance and trust becomes a guessing game. That week, I still hadn't lost my wife. Not technically, not legally, but emotionally. Emotionally, I was already being erased. A week had passed since Clara's birthday. Nothing explosive had happened, but something in me had shifted. I was no longer the man who trusted blindly. I had begun to watch, to listen, to remember things I used to ignore. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. The kind of vigilance that comes when the foundation starts to tremble. It started small. Clara had always been protective of her phone, but lately she started taking it with her even into the bathroom. She used to leave it charging in the kitchen overnight. Now, it never left her side. Once, I heard it buzz in the middle of the night. She reached for it fast, too fast, and turned the screen away from me. I said nothing, not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid of what I might find if I pressed further. Some betrayals don't need to be spoken aloud. They echo in silence. I began going through old photos, birthday parties, vacations, game nights. Jonas was in almost all of them, always smiling, always beside me. But suddenly, I saw things I hadn't noticed before, a hand on Clara's shoulder that lingered 1 second too long. A glance exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. That one photo, Clara laughing, Jonas looking at her instead of the camera. That look, it wasn't friendly. How had I missed it? Or had I just refused to see? One evening, I decided to test something. I told Clara I'd be working late, but I left work early, took a cab home, and stayed in the car across the street. My heart was beating like a warning drum. I watched the front door, waited. At exactly 7:12 p.m., Jonas showed up. He didn't knock. He walked in with a key. I sank lower into the seat, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. They had shared a key before. It was for emergencies, or so I had told myself, but this wasn't an emergency. This was quiet permission, a routine. The lights in the house flickered on. 2 silhouettes moved past the window. I couldn't tell what they were doing, couldn't see if they touched, but I saw enough to feel sick. I didn't go inside. I drove to the edge of the city and sat at an overlook for an hour. Didn't think, just stared at the horizon. There's a moment when heartbreak stops being sharp. it becomes something else, something heavier, like dragging a corpse through your chest. The next day, I acted normal. I smiled at Clara, kissed her goodbye before work, told Jonas we should grab drinks that weekend. He agreed, said it with that same easy charm I used to admire, but I had started to see it for what it was. A mask stretched tight over something rotten. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. I needed to be sure. I needed proof, not because I wanted to save the marriage. I think deep down, I already knew it was over. What I needed was a reason not to regret what I was about to do. A few nights later, Clara was asleep. I unlocked her phone with her thumb while she dozed off on the couch. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages. Nothing. No texts from Jonas, nothing in WhatsApp, Messenger, or even archived emails. Either she had deleted everything, or they were using something else. And then I found it, a shared album in her photo app, hidden inside a folder named Receipts. It was all there, pictures of them together, nothing graphic, nothing overt. But it didn't need to be. A shot of Jonas cooking shirtless in our kitchen. Clara sitting on the counter in her robe, smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. Another one, blurry but damning, his hand on her lower back, her head resting on his shoulder. It was intimacy, casual, lived in, the kind you don't fake. I closed the app, put the phone back, and sat there, watching her sleep. How do you look at someone the same way after seeing their other life? The betrayal wasn't just the sex, it was the ease, the repetition, the comfort they had with each other, on ground that was supposed to be mine. She stirred slightly, murmured something in her sleep. I turned off the lamp and walked out of the room, not because I couldn't stay, but because I didn't want to kill what was left of the man I used to be. After that night, something inside me hardened, not exploded, not shattered, just crystallized. People imagine betrayal as this explosive thing, glass breaking, plates thrown, screaming matches in the kitchen. But the deepest kind of betrayal? It's quiet, it doesn't shout, it settles, it seeps into your bones and rearranges your sense of truth. I stopped trying to save the marriage, stopped fantasizing that maybe it was just a phase, or that maybe I had misunderstood. No, I had understood perfectly. I had seen enough, not just in photos, but in their comfort, their ease, that lived-in intimacy. It wasn't new. It had roots, and I'd been watering it without knowing. The worst part wasn't Clara. It was Jonas, my best friend, the man I'd confided in when Clara had postpartum depression, the one who helped me paint the nursery, who gave the toast at our wedding. There are wounds only a friend can inflict, because only a friend knows exactly where to cut. I didn't scream at Clara. I didn't confront Jonas. I started planning, not revenge. Not exactly. I started planning a reckoning. Because if this was going to burn, I wasn't going to let it burn me alone. The next weekend, I told Jonas I needed help with the garage. He showed up smiling, holding 2 coffees like always. He handed me one, and I took it. I even thanked him. We talked about football, the economy, random shit. All while I watched his eyes, looking for guilt, fear, discomfort. But Jonas was smooth. He'd always been smooth. He leaned on the hood of my car, sipping his drink, making jokes about work. I played along, laughed in the right places, asked about his new project at the office. Then I dropped the first stone. I found something weird on Clara's phone, I said casually. Old photos. His eyes didn't flinch, not even a blink. He just nodded slowly. Like what? I shrugged. Stuff from last year. I didn't know she kept some of those. You and her hanging out while I was out of town. Still nothing. He took another sip of coffee. Yeah, he said. I remember. She said she was bored, so we went out for lunch a couple times. You cool with that? He was baiting me, testing me. I guess, I said. Just felt off, you know? The timing. He smiled. She was lonely, man. Don't overthink it. And there it was. The spin. The excuse. That same gentle manipulation he'd used on girlfriends in college. Now he was using it on me. After he left, I went to Clara. I didn't confront her, not directly. I asked about Jonas. She paused. Too long. Then said, "What about him?" "I just feel like you two have gotten close," I said. "Closer than I realized." She didn't deny it. She just said, "You were always working, Alex." And that was when I understood. She'd already justified it. To herself. To him. To whoever she thought she had to. It wasn't even about me anymore. It was about what she thought she deserved. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my car in the driveway thinking, you don't just lose a wife and a best friend in one blow. You lose history. You lose the version of yourself that trusted, the one that believed home was safe. I started writing things down, dates, moments, little comments they'd made over the last 2 years. I was building a timeline, not for court, not for drama, but for me. Because when you start to question your reality, you need a record, something to prove to yourself you weren't crazy, that they were. The next step was more subtle. I went into Jonas's office late one night. We had shared Dropbox folders from a project years ago. I still had access. Inside, I found something. Not photos, but messages. Exported iMessages between his phone and someone labeled Red. It was Clara. The timestamps matched the night she told me she was at yoga or visiting her sister. One message said, "I wish he'd just find out already. I'm tired of sneaking around." Another, "Do you think he suspects?" And the one that broke me, "He's not a bad man, but he's not you." I stared at that line for a long time, not because it hurt, because it made everything click into place. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It was layered, constructed, planned. You don't come back from that. You don't talk it out. You don't cry and hug and forgive. You burn it down. But I wasn't going to rage. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to pull it all apart, carefully, piece by piece. It's funny how betrayal sharpens you, not all at once, like a switch, but slowly, like a blade being dragged across stone, again and again. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was focused. The morning after I read those messages, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at myself differently, not as a victim, not as a man abandoned. I looked like a man becoming something else. Clara was still asleep. I could hear her soft breathing through the door. It was surreal, knowing that just a few feet away lay someone who had slowly carved my trust into ribbons, and still slept like she deserved peace. I didn't wake her. Instead, I picked up my phone and began what I now call Phase 1. Phase 1 wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was exposure. Not public, not messy, not the kind you'd see in movies. I wanted truth to bleed slowly, to make them nervous, paranoid, to unravel them the way they'd unraveled me. I started with Jonas. He'd always been a man who cared deeply about perception, a clean guy, always paid his taxes early, always wore a collared shirt to casual brunches, the kind of man who smiled too easily at waitresses and quoted leadership books. I knew where to poke. I called his office anonymously the next day. Told HR he was having an inappropriate relationship with a client's wife. No names, just enough detail to make it believable. 3 days later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he'd been pulled into a discreet internal review. It wasn't much, but the crack had started. Clara was trickier. She'd built her identity around being the good one, the stable one, the wife who held everything together. I started planting seeds. I invited her sister over for dinner, someone Clara always judged for being dramatic and reckless. And over wine, I asked her, "Did Clara ever tell you about that trip she took last fall, when I was out of town?" Her sister frowned. "The one where she said she stayed home with the flu?" I nodded. "Yeah, weird, right? She sent me photos from home, but something always felt off. She didn't respond, but she remembered, and that's what I needed, for doubt to spread like ink in water. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. I wasn't a sociopath, but something inside me was enjoying the shift. They'd made me feel powerless. Now I was the one moving pieces, not screaming, not accusing, just tightening the noose, one loop at a time. One evening, Clara came into the kitchen while I was chopping vegetables. "Alex," she said, her voice low, "is everything okay between us?" That was the moment I realized. She didn't know when it changed. She only knew it had. I smiled, calm as ever. "Of course," I said. "Why do you ask?" She hesitated. "You've been distant." I set down the knife. "I've just been thinking a lot," I said, "about our future." She looked relieved, like I was going to suggest therapy or a vacation. But my version of thinking about the future was imagining her face the day the mask came off. Later that night, I returned to the Dropbox account. I went deeper. Buried in an archive folder, one Jonas probably thought he deleted, was a single video file, titled J&C Last Winter. I stared at the screen for almost a full minute before I pressed play. It was them, in a hotel room, laughing, touching, her wearing the sweater I'd gifted her for Christmas, he whispering into her ear, she smiling like a teenager in love. And then she said it, clear as day. "I feel guilty sometimes, like he doesn't deserve this, but I can't stop." He kissed her shoulder. "It's not about what he deserves, it's about what we want." I paused it there. I didn't need to see the rest. I downloaded the file, made 3 copies. One went onto a USB I slipped into an envelope with no note. The envelope went into Jonas's office mailbox at work. I dropped it off at 7:45 a.m., just before the receptionist arrived. I knew his boss would see it. I wanted them to. Phase 1 was done. They wouldn't know where the fire started, only that it was burning, and that was enough. I didn't smile, not once, because this wasn't joy. This was justice, bleeding in. Guilt doesn't scream, it whispers, it nudges in the quiet hours, curls up next to you in bed, follows you into boardrooms and grocery stores. And for people like Clara and Jonas, who had built their lives on appearing good, guilt was a toxin. They weren't built to carry. I just gave it time to ferment, and it worked. The first real crack appeared when Jonas cancelled on our annual friend group trip. We'd been going to Lake Tahoe every February for years. Tradition, even when it felt forced. But 2 days before departure, he texted the group, "Can't make it, work emergency, rain check." It didn't fool anyone. Sarah, a mutual friend, messaged me privately. "Jonas is acting weird. Something happened?" I typed back, "Not sure, we haven't talked much lately." That was true, and not we weren't talking, but I was listening and watching. Clara started avoiding eye contact. That's when I knew the seeds were blooming. She began doing small, frantic things, folding laundry that was already folded, rearranging books that didn't need rearranging, asking questions she didn't really want answered. "Do you think we're happy, Alex?" "I think we're surviving," I'd reply. I wasn't angry anymore. I was composed, and nothing unsettles a liar more than the silence of the person they've wronged. Jonas, on the other hand, tried to salvage his image. I got an email from him out of nowhere. "Hey man, been thinking about you a lot lately. Hope you're well. Let's grab coffee." "Soon," I didn't reply. Then another, "Let me know when you're free." Miss our talks, still nothing. I wanted him to stew in uncertainty, let his imagination do the damage, because silence isn't absence, it's power. Clara, too, was spiraling. One evening, she came home late. Her eyes were glassy. She walked straight, past me into the bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed, unmoving. I stood in the doorway. She didn't look at me. "Jonas is in trouble," she whispered. I said nothing. "He's being investigated. They found something, a video no one knows." Who sent it? I leaned against the frame, calm. What kind of video? She shook her head. It doesn't matter, he's freaking out. He thinks someone's trying to ruin him. Is he guilty of something? I asked softly. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. That week, I watched her unravel like thread from an old sweater. She stopped wearing makeup, stopped singing to herself while cooking, stopped checking her phone with that subtle smile I used to miss. The house felt colder, even in spring, but I was warmer inside than I had been in months, because this was the part they never expected, that I could live with the truth better than they could. Clara made one last effort. One morning I found a letter on my pillow, handwritten, torn edges, a faint perfume I hadn't smelled in years. It read, "I don't know when I lost you, maybe the moment I crossed that line, maybe before that, but I still love you. I want to fix this if it can be fixed. If you can ever look at me again and not see what I did, please, I'm sorry." Clara, I folded it carefully, put it in my drawer, and never spoke of it. Jonas tried again too, called me this time. I let it ring. Then a voicemail. "Alex, man, I made a mistake, a huge one. I didn't know how to tell you, I panicked, but I swear I never meant to hurt you like this. Please, let's talk. I didn't delete it, I saved it. You don't erase confessions, you archive them, the best. Apart. I hadn't said a single word to either of them about what I knew. Not one accusation, not one confrontation. And yet, their worlds were falling apart. Why? Because people like them don't fear exposure. They fear the waiting. They fear that the next moment might be the one where everything crashes, and I was patient, very, very patient. It started with her hands. Clara had always moved with elegance, the kind of poise that made even mundane things feel like choreography. She would stir tea like a ballerina, tracing circles on stage. Close draws like exhaling gently through. Her fingertips, there was precision in her grace, quiet control. But now, her fingers trembled. She tried to hide it, drinking coffee with two hands, brushing her hair more slowly, like a child mimicking calm. But I noticed. Of course I noticed. It wasn't just the shaking. It was the way she lingered outside the kitchen door before entering, as if rehearsing her entrance. The way she would start a sentence and abandon it. Halfway, eyes searching for a word that didn't exist. The way she checked her phone, not out of habit but out of fear. Fear that something would appear. Or maybe that something wouldn't. Guilt has a posture, and Clara wore it like an ill-fitting coat, stiff, heavy, and obvious to anyone paying attention, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. She tried to patch the cracks. Little gestures. Dinner. Ready when I got home, new coffee beans she knew I liked, a playlist waiting for me in the car. She even started asking about my writing again, the one thing she had quietly stopped supporting over the years. Did you ever finish that story? The one about the brother who... No, I cut her off. She nodded. Didn't ask again. Everything she did screamed, "Please see me, please see that I'm trying." But the thing about betrayal is, you start to wonder if every kind gesture is just another manipulation. One night, I came home late. She was curled on the couch, wearing the sweater I bought her 2 winters ago, the one she used to reserve for lazy Sundays. She stood when she saw me a little too quickly. "I heated up your dinner," she said, then paused. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to eat with me." I stared at her for a moment. "No," I said. "But thanks." Her face didn't fall. She had stopped expecting kindness. She just nodded and sat back down. She didn't even turn the TV back on, just sat in the silence I left her with. The next morning, I woke up and found her in the garden, barefoot, in a robe, kneeling in the dirt. She wasn't gardening, she was just touching the soil, her fingers digging slowly, as if hoping the earth would swallow the weight she carried. From the upstairs window, she looked like a statue, motionless, surrounded by wilting petals and dry leaves. She stayed there for over an hour, When she came inside, she didn't look at me, just went straight to the shower and stayed under the water long enough to drain the boiler. Later that week, I called her sister, not to tattle, not to demand answers, just to hear something familiar. Her voice was warm, too warm. "She's not okay, is she?" her sister asked quietly. "No. She told me she did something unforgivable." I didn't answer. She said she ruined you, still silent. Then she added, "But you know what scared her more than losing you?" "What?" "Losing the version of herself she was when she was with you." That hit me harder than expected, because I had once loved that version too. That night, Clara approached me again. We were in bed, the air between us cold despite the summer heat. She reached under the blanket, fingers searching for mine. This time, I didn't flinch, but I didn't hold back either. She left her hand there, brushing my skin like it might catch fire from the contact. "Alex," she whispered. I didn't respond. "I know I've become someone I don't recognize, but I'm trying." Still silence. "I don't expect anything from you, not anymore." She turned over, her back to me, and for the first time I saw her for what she really was, not just a woman who cheated, but someone unraveling from the inside, thread by thread. Here's the part she never figured out. Jonas hadn't told her everything, and I had let that omission live between us, because I needed her to rot in that ambiguity, to fear what else I knew, to question if her silence had ever been enough to protect him. That was the cruelest part. Not yelling, not blaming, but giving her the space to watch her own mask decay. One crack at a time. Guilt is its own punishment. But suspicion is the ghost that never leaves. I planted doubt like a gardener, left clues I knew she would find. An old voicemail on speakerphone, a screenshot left open too long, a story about Jonas's past that didn't add up. She started to sweat when his name came up, started to wonder, what if Alex knows everything? What if this is just the beginning? But I never gave her the answer, and that had become her personal purgatory. People think vengeance is rage, shouting, slamming doors, public humiliation. But sometimes vengeance is precision. It's restraint. It's letting someone destroy themselves in slow motion while you watch. Clara thought I was punishing her with silence, but she was punishing herself with imagination. And nothing I could have done would have hurt more than that. Jonas always had a way of slipping into conversations like he belonged there. He didn't need permission. He never asked for doors to be opened. He just assumed they would be, and most of the time, they were. People liked Jonas, respected him, trusted him. He had the kind of charm that didn't feel like charm until it was too late. I met him at a time when I needed a friend, not a mirror. And Jonas, ever the opportunist, knew exactly how to become what someone else was missing. We hadn't spoken since the day I found the messages. He didn't even try to deny it. "Man, I didn't mean for it to happen," he said over the phone, voice flat. "It just did. One of those things. Life is messy." Like he'd spilled coffee on my manuscript. That was it. No begging, no apologies that meant anything. At the time, I thought that was the full extent of the betrayal, but I was wrong. Jonas hadn't told me the worst part. 3 months later, I received an envelope. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in blocky, stiff letters. Inside, a photo. Old. Printed on glossy paper. From years ago. Me, Clara, Jonas. His arm around her waist. My hand on her shoulder, a triangle, disguised as a friendship. On the back, in ink that had bled slightly through the paper, "You weren't the only one being lied to." There was no signature, but I recognized the handwriting. I drove to Jonas's apartment that night. He lived alone, high-rise, the kind of place you buy when you want to pretend you're successful, even if you're drowning in credit card debt. He opened the door like he'd been expecting me. "Alex," he said, smiling just a little, "figured it was time." "Time for what?" "For you to finally ask the real question." I didn't sit down, didn't take off my coat. I stood there waiting for the fire to start. Jonas walked to the bar cart, poured himself a drink, didn't offer me one. "She told you it happened once, right?" he asked, sipping slowly. "That it was a mistake, a single night of weakness." I nodded. He laughed, short and bitter. "Clara lied. It hadn't been once. It hadn't even been 5 times. According to Jonas, it had started months before I found the message. Started with late-night confessions about how I was distant, turned into inside jokes, then touches, then hotel rooms. "She cried after the first time," Jonas said, watching my reaction like a scientist watching a test subject. "I thought it was guilt, but it wasn't. She said she cried because she didn't know how to go back. Go back to me. Go back to the version of herself I thought I loved." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Jonas leaned against the counter, eyes cold, like he was done pretending. "Because I lost everything anyway. Clara doesn't speak to me. You hate me. I figured might as well burn the rest of the bridge." "No redemption." He laughed again. "There's no redemption for me, man. I'm not the victim in this story, never pretended to be." He looked down at his drink, swirled it. "But you should know something else." He paused, then, "Clara wasn't the first." That line cracked the floor beneath me. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the context, the detail that would dull the blade. Nothing came, so I asked, "What do you mean?" Jonas shrugged, took another sip. "I've slept with 2 of your girlfriends. Clara makes 3. I almost laughed. It sounded so absurd, so grotesque, but it was real. He kept talking like he'd been waiting to confess. "That girl in college, the one who ghosted you after spring break, she came to me, said she was confused. I didn't stop her. And the worst part, I never even felt bad, not until now, not until I saw what it did to you." I could feel something cold and ancient rise in my throat. I didn't hit him. I didn't scream. I just turned and left. Because there are moments when the damage is so complete, so intricately woven into your life, that fighting it becomes pointless. You don't kill the monster. You just walk away from the cave. That night I sat in my car for hours. I didn't drive home. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there staring at the sky, waiting for something inside me to break. But nothing did. No tears, no screams, just silence, and the realization that I had surrounded myself with people who wore masks so well, I forgot to check for the eyes behind them. Clara had lied. Jonas had lied. And I had believed. Not because I was naive, but because I wanted to believe in something that made life bearable. But now I knew. Jonas didn't sleep with my wife out of passion or love. He did it because he could, because betrayal wasn't a side effect for him. It was his nature. And Clara, she had let it happen over and over, even while looking me in the eye every morning. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it chains you to a darker version of yourself. But at least now, I knew who I was dealing with, and I was done being the one who didn't know everything. Se quiser, posso seguir para o capítulo 9, ou criar os prompts visuais deste capítulo. O que prefere? There's a moment after you've been burned when the pain stops, not because it's healed, but because the nerves die. The skin, once screaming, goes quiet, and you're left with silence that feels more violent than the flame. That's where I was. The pain had calcified. Jonas's confession, the one he delivered like he was reading a grocery list, had severed something inside me. Not just the friendship, not just my marriage, but the belief that I was ever truly seen by the people I didn't go home that night. I couldn't walk into that house again, not with its memories like ghosts, not with Clara's scent still soaked into the pillows we once shared. Instead, I drove. No destination, just motion. A man trying to outrun the echo of his own name. I ended up at the place where Clara and I first kissed. an overlook above the city. The kind of spot teenagers use to pretend forever is real. We had come here on our second date. She wore that red jacket, the one with the broken zipper. The wind had tangled her hair across her face. She laughed when I brushed it aside. She had kissed me like she meant it. And maybe, in that moment, she did. But love without loyalty is a lie, wrapped in warmth. I thought of calling her, not to scream, not to forgive, just to ask why. But I didn't, because somewhere in the wreckage of my life, I had found something more important than closure, clarity. I rented a room in a cheap motel that smelled like bleach and regret. I turned off my phone. I sat in the dark, and I wrote. Pages and pages, not letters, not rants, but truth, what I had felt, what I had ignored, how I had given more than I had, hoping it would be enough, and how it never was. The next morning I woke up to 30 missed calls, 10 from Clara, 5 from Jonas, the rest from friends who had apparently caught wind of the fallout. Somehow the truth had leaked. Jonas must have told someone. Or Clara, either way, it was out now. I wasn't the only one in the dark anymore. By noon, Clara was at my door. I didn't let her in. She stood there, holding her keys like a lifeline. Her mascara smudged, her eyes swollen. Please, she whispered. I'm not here to scream, I said, or to punish you. Her lips quivered. Then why won't you let me talk? Because talking won't fix what's dead. She reached out, touched my arm. It didn't hurt, but it didn't feel like anything either. I had moved beyond pain. I didn't mean to fall for him, she said, and that was when I realized she still didn't get it. This wasn't about love. It was about betrayal, about breaking something sacred because you assumed you could put it back together later. I shook my head. Go home, Clara. Please, go. She left, and this time I didn't watch her walk away. In the days that followed, I met with a lawyer. Divorce proceedings began. Quietly, efficiently, without drama. Jonas was gone, moved to another city, someone said, trying to reinvent himself again. He always had that habit. But I wasn't interested in tracking him. I wasn't interested in revenge. Because vengeance is a prison, and I'd already spent enough time behind emotional bars. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. Not the version of my life I had before. That version was built on illusions. No, this time I was starting from zero. A new apartment, a new phone number, a new set of rules for who got to enter my world. I began therapy. I stopped drinking. I started running again. The first mile nearly killed me, but something about the ache, the realness of it, reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still capable of healing. I found the letter Jonas had once written me on my wedding day, folded into my tuxedo jacket. Back then, it read like brotherhood. Now, it read like a warning. I burned it. And for the first time in months, I felt warmth that didn't hurt. Betrayal doesn't just break you. It forces you to decide who you'll become in the aftermath. Some choose bitterness, others choose numbness. But me, I chose to feel every scar, to trace them, to learn from them, because the only thing worse than being hurt is never understanding why you let it happen. In the end, I didn't forgive them, but I forgave myself. For loving too blindly, for trusting too easily, for staying too long, and that was enough. For now. They say time heals, but whoever said that forgot to mention what healing actually looks like. It's not graceful, it's not poetic, it's messy, it's loud on the inside and quiet on the outside. It's remembering on Tuesdays and forgetting on Sundays. It's learning how to walk again, when you're still bleeding. That was my year after Clara and Jonas. People expected rage, expected public meltdowns, Facebook rants, threats of revenge, but I gave them silence. Not because I was weak, but because I knew rage would only delay the healing, and I was tired of being hurt. I wasn't interested in proving anything, not to her, not to him, not to anyone who had watched my life crack open like glass and whispered behind their hands. I didn't need vindication. I needed peace. I saw Clara once, nearly a year later. At a bookstore downtown, she didn't see me. She was holding a novel, tracing the cover with her thumb. She looked older, not in years, but in something deeper, the way guilt ages a person. And I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel love either. I just felt distance, like she was a chapter I had finished, one I'd never reread, but would always remember the feeling of. As for Jonas, he never came back. I heard rumors that he had moved to Arizona, that he was dating someone new, that he had started a podcast about growth after failure. Irony never did lack ambition, but I didn't dig. Let him start over. Let him spin his stories. I had mine, and mine were built on truth. What people don't tell you about betrayal is this: it doesn't just show you who they are, it shows you who you are. I was a man who gave too much of himself, who believed too hard in the people around him, who confused loyalty with sacrifice. And when it all fell apart, I had a choice: to become like them, broken and breaking others, or to rise different, stronger, wiser, quieter. Forgiveness didn't come like a thunderclap. It came in pieces, in choosing not to check her social media, in deleting old voicemails without listening, in no longer rehearsing what I would say if we ever ran into each other. It came when I no longer needed closure from them, because I had given it to myself. Sometimes I sit alone at night, not sad, not angry, just still, and I think about the man I used to be, before the affair, before the betrayal, before the illusion cracked and I saw my life for what it really was. Not a fairy tale, not a tragedy, just a lesson, a brutal, necessary, sacred lesson. And if I could go back, would I change anything? Maybe, maybe not. Because without the fire, I wouldn't have known how to rebuild. Without the betrayal, I wouldn't have learned how to belong to myself. Without losing them, I would have never found me. Final reflection. Narration tone, calm, reflective, honest. Some betrayals never fully leave us. They echo, they haunt, but eventually they quiet down. And what remains is the person you chose to become in the aftermath. You can drown in what they did to you, or you can rise, scarred but sovereign. This story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about truth. And what happens when you stop running from it? So here I am, no longer a victim, no longer waiting for apologies that won't come. Just a man, free, finally. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't bleed, they echo. They show up in silence, in trust withheld, in love feared. And yet, what we do after the betrayal defines us far more than what broke us. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. Healing doesn't mean it didn't hurt. But choosing peace, despite the pain, that's where the real power lives. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of something you've been through, or someone you once had to let go of, leave a like, share your truth in the comments, and subscribe, because every week we bring you stories that aren't just told, they're felt. This is Betrayal and Forgiveness, where the scars speak louder than the silence.